I think that's probably the biggest negative, is that typically school board members aren't political people. We have enough trouble getting people to run for school board anyway, in a lot of cases.
It's all more than putting them there, putting the little Republicans on there. Signs those.
Yeah, do it anyway.
Yeah.
Well, no, I appreciate that feedback, and, I think we're all in the same space, and I really do like Steve's idea of maybe just moving up the filing deadline, so we have longer.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And that's,
And that's really what it is.
and what, I've heard some horror stories throughout Indiana of guys paying a lot to run for school board, which is stupid. But, I've heard one guy, he was a customer of mine, paid $15,000 to run for school board. He never make that back. He only served one term. But, there's another bill in here talking about, the party paying out $2,000 or something like that, for so much money to each board member that runs in their party, and that's just, don't need that. Bill 1074 kinda goes along with that, is you'd have to declare your party. There's another one in here, I think, concerning that too. Let's see if we get that. Road funding, House Bill 1086 provides that the amounts currently distributed from the motor vehicle highway account and the local road and street account to county, cities, and towns based upon the proportionate share of road and street mileage. Shall instead be distributed based on the proportion share of road and street vehicle miles traveled. That's kind of a mixed up wording, but
I think lanes versus road miles, I think,
It's not worded that, but that's,
Yeah, I think that's-
that's another way to try and get.
which is detrimental to us in the end.
But that's probably, being curious if that's filed by somebody like in Indianapolis. or-
He is, he serves. So
That's
that's exactly.
what it is.
so you know where it's at.
Trying to rob us.
It's a money grab.
The big dog.
I mean, I sympathize with it, but it's not, the pie is not,
Exactly.
initially.
Another one here, education-wise, elimination of textbook fees, House Bill 1123. I think we've seen that every year for the last 15 at least.
Could I ask a question on that one, or on that one, Steve?
Go ahead.
From what I could see, there's 3 different bills on textbooks,
Yeah, I think so.
1123, 1203, and 1255. What's, the only difference I can see is that one calls it a student resource fund and the other one's a curricular fund. From my perspective, if that's the case, I think from most school people's perspective, the 1203 that refers to it as a student resource fund provides more flexibility for us versus a curricular fund. I don't know how big of a deal that is. My thought is if it's called a curricular fund, what control does the state want eventually in selecting curriculum and things like that if they're paying for it? If they're paying for the books. Whereas a resource fund is a little more generic now. I don't know, talk to anybody about that or not.
How does it apply to some of the tech things that you include in your textbook?
I don't know, does it get that specific?
I haven't been through that bill yet,
I
but
don't think that can.
my thought would be if you didn't go with textbook, it would allow for more flexibility, kind of in the space that you guys are doing down in Cloverdale. Utilize some of those funds for those
Yeah,
resources.
which would be good,
Right.
as long as there's flexibility and choice but the local school district still gets to choose the curriculum.
Yeah,
that they
right,
want.
Totally got you there, you
Yeah.
don't have to.
These are all additional funds coming from the state for the schools, so it's still an expensive proposition. It's more government control and still less.
Yeah. I'm not advocating for it either way, I just, if it goes that direction, just want as much flexibility within the laws we can have as far as selection.
Can we leave it alone?
We have for a long time.
We kick cans down the road all the time.
One of the things I asked, Greg, Jeff, and Mike Kemp the other day is, if this passes and the kids and the parents don't have any skin in the game, how are the books and resources gonna be treated? I paid money to rent this book, and when I turned it in, you know, if I damaged it, I've got some responsibility, but if I don't have any skin in the game, then it changes that perspective.
It's my understanding the schools can't go after them anyway. Like my wife had a kid destroy a school instrument and she had no recourse against the kid because the state statute said they couldn't recover it. So
We send kids to parents with small claims for uncollected,
yeah.
so you can get it. You just have to have a collection agency. After you do everything you can locally to get it, then you can turn it over to collections.
She was told by her administration that state statute doesn't allow them to go after her.
And is that for damaged property or?
That's for both. Like for our Chromebooks, part of the expense of the rental is insurance. So if it's under $75, the insurance covers it, and anything over that, the parent has to pay for it. Now, we don't deny the student the Chromebook, but you don't always get it. I mean, if you don't have any skin in it, I mean, it sounds great on the surface, but if it's going to take money from another fund, then it may not be something K-12's in favor of, you know, depending on where money comes from.
Just for clarification, textbooks include the, you know, Chromebooks and all that,
We have a separate technology fee for that.
but I mean, this would cover those?
That's what I asked.
I would.
This is
yeah,
what
I
you were
would-
I
saying,
don't think
flexibility.
That's what I'm asking is, would that cover?
No.
I think
It's
maybe
curriculum.
1203 could be, if it is
Yes.
curricular materials.
Yeah,
But the other two, I don't think would cover technology. I think
Yeah.
it would be strictly
what-
textbook.
Greg was saying, if it's curriculum materials, then
It would.
that would, I would hope.
That's
Yeah.
it's a substantial cost, so we have, what, 1 million students in Indiana, and we graduate, what, 67,000-ish
Mhm.
a year, so I mean, that's a lot of textbooks.
It's a lot of money, and again, I could just see down the road it being a situation where as a state, if you're paying for science books, work a deal out with a particular company, and this is the company we're gonna go with for science, and that may not be what everyone in the state obviously wants, so I would just be concerned about the flexibility of local choice.
Is it, I mean, I think the majority of states in the union don't charge textbooks fees. I think we're one of the only ones that
I
do.
think
About
there's,
13 or 14.
I think it's down to 10 maybe.
Yeah,
We're one
so,
of 10.
I mean,
There's nothing wrong with it. But we still should be, the state shouldn't be controlling it all.
Okay, another one here, House Bill 1225 is a little bit interesting. Requires the interim study committee on elections, study all issues related to making voting by absentee ballot by mail as secure as in-person voting. I just thought that was interesting. I'm not sure how you can do, yeah, how you gonna do that, but. Okay, let's see, what else we got here? I tried to mark it last time. Business personal property tax exemption. Looks like a good idea for farmers. Moves exemption from 80,000 to 250,000.
What bill number are you on?
House Bill 1430.
So long as there's makeup revenue for local units, including schools and everybody else. I mean, that's been the problem. Our tax base has been chipped away, and basically that transfers the tax burden to residences, apartments, and actually, you know, if you take away the personal property on business, it transfers it to some degree to the real estate side of things, so.
And we've talked about, we've seen this one, I think last
Yeah.
legislative session or the year before, and you and I talked about that one.
Yeah,
Variations.
1448 was another one interested by Farm Bureau. Sales tax exemption for ag equipment. Uh, 1473, I've got,
Can we back up for a second? Do we have any perspective on that one? Anybody have a?
What is it, is it adding tax to it?
It's exempting agricultural equipment from sales tax.
Okay. Agriculture inputs, I guess, from my perspective, agriculture inputs are exempt, and it's hard to define a difference between corn planter and seed.
Snowball.
Pardon?
Difference between a corn planter and a shovel.
Yeah, yeah.
So I asked, because I'm co-authoring on this bill, it came to me late December, and my concern was that our farmers are facing, as you know, John, greater tightening of their margins, just like a lot of other businesses are, but also the cost of those farm tractors are astronomical right now. The sales tax on just a combine alone could pay somebody for a year, a salary, so I think in order to keep our farmers in a good position, we need to help them with things like this.
I would agree with that.
another one that's kind of interesting for Farm Bureau, 1473, the Farmland Trust. And if I am correct, they give help from Indiana State Department of Ag, but I think it's a way to, you put your land in a trust, and that way it stays as farmland. I think that's part of the deal with that. We just something.
Only got something like that now.
There's quite a few trusts, I think, that she's probably looking for actually an appropriation from ISDA. That's probably what she's trying to get to.
1478, and went to the state convention last month, and it was interesting because they talked about something like this, but 1478, meat expansion and development program, and establishing the meat processing investment grant program fund to provide grants to eligible recipients or eligible applicants. Down southeastern corner of Indiana, there is a Farm Bureau that's active in trying to build a processing plant for cattle and hogs and sheep, and they're going through all the process. We're talking about $1 million, and it's needed down there, quite a bit, and we could sure use one around here, considering, it's, you're 6 months out if you want to butcher a steer or anything else right now, and but that would maybe help get some more of those around here.
Do you know which Farm Bureau is working on that?
No, I can't tell you
Was it
right now.
Southeast though?
Yeah.
I think the pandemic really helped draw attention to the importance of this.
Yeah.
A lot of people started processing their own meat, and you were a year and a half out at one point during the pandemic, so.
Of course, the Department of Health, I think it is does inspections for years, have been trying to close down every independent processing plant they could. In other words, those old locker plants, the state, veterinary, I'm not sure which division dealt with it, but they were strenuously trying to eliminate the need for inspectors and eliminate 30 years ago, they were talking about, that's when we began to shut down these private processing plants because they couldn't get state health board or state inspections. They controlled that by the state, didn't want to hire the inspectors, so they shut down all these local butchering shops. So I don't, is this bill gonna improve that? That's the bottleneck in it, it's not.
I think, did we not get some money for
So the last two
inspectors
legislative,
last year?
the last 2 years,
Yeah.
we've appropriated greater funds to that to have
So
more
they've been
inspectors
trying
and
to
have-
help bring that back, you know,
So,
So what's this bill gonna do differently than that?
the facilities. Help pay for the whole yard's, processing plant.
The demand is out there, you shouldn't have to, shouldn't have to fund it, the facilities.
Yeah, the demand is out there, I don't, it's just coming up with the dollars. Okay, 1552. Local income tax funding for EMS services. Remove provisions that require a county to meet certain qualifications before it is authorized to adopt an emergency medical services local income tax rate.
Yeah, right, so, I'm gonna assume what they're alluding to, or trying to get after that bill. Last year, last legislative session, the state approved being able to have a lit for EMS, but there could be no other EMS receiving any, state or local, revenue. So, there was a question about the volunteer element up in the northern part of Putnam County. They receive no funding. They don't get it from the township, they don't get it from the fire department, but our expert advice was telling us we couldn't pursue the EMS. Well, we cleared that up, we can. And I think we're, based on the last meeting with the council, we're gonna go down that path. But the point is, if that, for some reason, had gotten any kind of funding, we couldn't take that avenue as a revenue stream in the county, even though, let's say, 95% of the county, the only coverage if it is our EMS. So, and the way it was worded, it almost left me to believe if you had a private enterprise there, at first, so I guess it would be worth looking at, is what I'm saying. I think we're okay here, based on the last reading I got, and we're going to.
but if for some reason that entity started taking funding, we wouldn't be then.
Yeah, so, I'm just saying, I'm not sure about the full rationale behind that. Just the way of background, the county took over from the nonprofit. We've been running it for 2 years now, a full 2 years. But as part of that process, when we took it over, we wanted to ensure that the county got coverage countywide. Under OL in the north, sometimes it was hit and miss whether they were manning Bainbridge or not. And the response times weren't to national standards. We're meeting those standards now. But the price tag's about $800,000. Portion of our funding, the people who are serviced are Medicare and Medicaid. And let's be candid, the federal government does not reimburse at the level of what it costs to operate the systems. It's a fallacy. So, we're doing the right thing, we're supporting the citizens in the county, but it comes at a price tag. And this is a way to set aside a dedicated funding stream to be able to help service that. And it still has to come under the cap. You can't have any more than 7.5% local income tax, and we're below that. And don't want to go to that ceiling, but if the local entity wants to go and use the lit option, I'm not sure about the restrictions that run there.
Just a question about that, I heard that LIFT doesn't even service Putnam County, is that right?
Pardon me?
And what was this, what you said LIFT, what was that?
No, lit, I'm sorry, local income tax.
Local income.
Okay, thank you.
That's a
Okay.
funding stream.
LIFT, okay,
Yeah.
sorry.
Just too old to use abbreviation.
Yeah.
Okay, 1557 is a little interesting. Asked for, the Department of Ag to conduct an inventory of farmland lost in Indiana between 2010 and 2022. And I'm sure that's a large enough number that they might get some people's attention and understand why we don't want to lose farm ground. Another one that's, sure to get a little bit of interest from Putnam County is the solar panel decommissioning and disposal study, Senate Bill 33. And it conducts a joint study concerning decommissioning and disposal of solar panels. And, we'll see where that goes.
So are you guys currently just watching that one, or do you have? a
Yeah, all of these are just monitored right now to see where they go. They haven't given us, their thoughts on any of that, but.
Because I had two Putnam County Farm Bureau people at the State House, last week, and they were strongly on
both
opposite
sides.
sides.
Well, yeah, maybe. I mean, we're trying to, well, Farm Bureau's kinda on both sides. They want it done right, is the major concern either way. But, you know, Farm Bureau supports increasing alternatives for, electricity. And, so therefore they have to support solar panels in that sense. But losing 2,000 acres of ground, that's a different story. And so we're kinda on both sides of the fence on that one.
Well, this bill though is trying to study the effects of decommissioning. And I'm involved in some of that, and basically, I've not seen any answers. In other words, what is the,
Process.
well, not only the process, but what is the detrimental stuff? You got glass, you got hazardous waste, what are you gonna have in 30 years?
Yeah.
And I've not seen any definitive analysis. If that bill is going to define that, it probably would be beneficial to everybody. Because right now, what you get from the solar panel, oh, it's nothing, there's no detrimental to it. You gotta pull up the metal stakes and you're going, but that's not necessarily, I don't know if that's true.
10 years from now.
Now, that's what,
I think somebody needs to look at that and analyze it.
I think the state can do a study and.
It's
to give
independent.
You guys in Putnam County trying to make that decision, as to what that termination is gonna look like.
they need this information and whatever comes out, put the lease.
Yeah.
Where, you know, this is what you gotta do.
If that can be
Spell it
done,
out.
if that can be done timely enough to be effective for our Putnam County project, it's probably worthwhile to Putnam County to have an analysis on that.
Well, like you said, John, no matter which side of the argument you're on, this should be beneficial probably.
Yeah,
Right, because at the present time, I've not seen any definitive analysis of it. But in other words, the solar panel people say there's no problem, and other people are saying, yeah, there may be. And the county's got, you're saying, the county's setting up a fund, or is attempting to set up a fund to fund this when it's 30 years from now, to have a guarantee fund.
Part of the agreement with the firm is they have to set aside money that.
And how much money is it gonna take 30 years from now?
But that's their dollars, not
Their
county
dollars.
dollars.
Well, if they don't put enough aside,
Well,
inflation at,
Go cheap away.
yeah, it'll cost 10 times. I mean, we don't know what it's gonna cost, depending on the
Yeah.
severity of the problem.
Different subject, but approach wise, it's like mineral extraction, in other words, now, you know, you were mining, you gotta be able to reclaim the land, put it back into use, maybe not original use, but back into functional use, same concept, agreement wise, you know. Whether the T's are crossed, the I's are dotted, I don't know, but that's part of the process.
Another one interesting for us old folks. The Senate Bill 90 freezes the property tax liability on a homestead or of an individual who is at least 65 years of age, maintain qualified interest in that homestead for 10 years. So, that would take out the inflation part and pay the same amount. Senate Bill 91, I think we've seen this every year, that they keep getting in on the CFOs, and CAFOs, and here they're wanting it inspected every year. And most of these confined feeding operations they're up to their neck in regulations the way it is. I don't know that they need any more. And most of those guys will tell you they're doing this already, you know, for the most part. And, oh, this one I'm not sure what it means, or the reason, or Senate Bill 133. It provides that an individual has the right to save and exchange seeds to grow food and grow, raise, produce, harvest, and consume the food that the individual chooses for the individual's own nourishment, sustenance, bodily health, and well-being. Why do we need a bill for this?
I don't know, I'm just wondering, Senator Dorio is from, a heavily Amish community, so I wonder if that has something to do with,
That constituency.
yeah.
Wasn't there something last year about copyrighting seed and not, if you bought seed from certain seed suppliers that, you know, because of patents and other rights,
You
you couldn't secondary sell it or keep it. Wasn't there something last year, a bill along those lines?
Well, the agreements that the farmers sign when they buy those specific genetic modified seeds absolutely prevent you from replanting anything that you raise without paying a license fee.
Right.
So that's.
But isn't that also an issue with like cross-pollination? I mean, you know, if I'm doing organic and my neighbor is doing regular Roundup Ready, it's gonna get ripped, and your seed is original, you want to keep that seed? I mean, if it has any of that genetic material, you're liable. So maybe this is to protect those farms, they're not intentionally getting that, you know, I mean, plants don't care, right? So it might be because of that. Because right now it is illegal. I mean, Indiana was a landmark state where when those crops first started, like there used to be a lot of farmers who would save their seeds, right? They would, you know, save back some and replant it the next year, and that became illegal when drift happened. So, you can't, I mean, it's just, I mean, it put a lot of like down home, you know, regular farmers like our grandparents, whatever, right, out of business because they couldn't do that. And then they didn't want to do Roundup Ready, but yet still people walking beans. I mean, this is years ago, so I would think it's probably to protect that, so.
But it needs to be simplified anyway. The bill, what are you going for here? Senate Bill 199, and our superintendents might want to mention on this one, the complexity index within the school funding formula, figured twice a year. Plus or minus.
Right. That would go into just the whole, we're looking at for foundational increases and things like that. Complexity has an issue, but a smaller issue than the foundation now.
So far, we really haven't talked about the foundation too much. We've really been more focused on higher education and capital investments there. But foundation's definitely coming. I think next week we're having we have the Department of Education coming in again to talk to us, and I think that's in that conversation.
Everything we're reading sounds positive.
Yeah.
At least, I mean, there's.
But the problem here is, if you do it twice a year, but you only budget once a year,
Well, and that
how do
was,
you adjust for it?
yeah, the House Bill 1431 is similar to that, I think, with the February graduation rate. So currently, when a student graduates early in December, then those students aren't counted in the February count. Well, we still have all the same expenses that we had and things like that. So that would be something we would, I think public schools would be very much in favor of, is allowing us to count midterm graduates in the February count. Because we do see a reduction in revenue. Those kids technically aren't there, however, you've got the same teachers, same buildings, and everything else you had to have in September.
Your
So,
budget's still
yeah.
set.
Yeah, like everything, all the same bills, so that was one I had, well, it was on the House side, but that was one I had marked, that,
And you said 1431?
1431 is the early graduation, yeah.
A couple more here, we mentioned this, the school board candidate filing deadline, Senate Bill 217. And this would be more of the fix for what we've seen earlier as far as this, turning in your petition and stuff the same time everybody else does. The Senate Bill 227 provides that a political action committee may not make total annual contributions in excess of an aggregate of $2,000 apportioned in any manner among all candidates for school board offices. That's what I was referring to. Okay, what else? I got one, the last one is an interesting one, and we need your opinion definitely on this one. It's, Senate Bill 322. Authored by State Senator Andy Zay from Noblesville, designates the breaded tenderloin sandwich as the official state sandwich of Indiana.
He's not.
Does everybody like the Indiana tenderloin?
There's a lot of debate on that.
All depends where you get.
Sadly, there probably
Then
would
you
be.
get samples?
You're supposed to buy it in Noblesville.
Yeah,
Just go with a pork burger.
I don't know if they got tenderloins in Noblesville. There ain't tenderloin in Noblesville, I don't think. So there's good tenderloin at Kirkland, at Booker's. We have eight there.
I don't know, is that in conflict with the governor's healthy, initiatives or something?
These calories don't count.
You don't need the bun.
Exception to that.
Don't need the bun.
You don't need the bun. Yeah, we'll take the bun. Hit it with a big hammer.
Okay, I'm gonna open it up to the public now and we'll kind of go around the room here in specific areas. If you have a bill number, you know which one we're talking about, I'll put it up on the computer, on the screen over here, and everybody can see what the description is. And, so let's start alphabetical with the education. Let's start out with education.
I'll share the floor with Corey too.
Yeah.
Just a couple of things we haven't talked about. House Bill 1268 is a requirement for seat belts on school buses, 3-point harness type school. restraints. I would be concerned with that being approved just because of the expense. That school buses have decades of proof that they're very safe vehicles. A standard 72 passenger bus is almost $100,000 at this point. And in the bill, it talks about using safety grant money and things like that to help subsidize the cost. But unless they increase those substantially, we use a safety grant, I think, as most do for our school resource officers and things like that. So while that sounds good, there's really not money there for that. So I would, and it requires a cumbersome hearing process and that kind of thing with, to review the costs and things like that. With the
And how many buses do you have in Cloverdale?
We've probably got 30, yeah. So by the time you add the cost, I mean, we're required to have those in our special education buses, activity buses and things like that, and that's fine, I mean, they're needed there, really. But then the law also goes on to require us to make every occupant wear the seatbelt. So, I mean, that's, if there was a big safety concern, it would be one thing. But school buses are very safe vehicles, and I don't think the additional cost that's going to put on the taxpayer is worth it. Just
Special needs buses have them. don't they?
we do, yeah, they're all required to have them. And again, they're needed. We have preschool kids, and there's no question on that, but on just a standard school bus, I don't know that it's necessary.
And I don't know that there's data that supports that either, as far as, you know,
Right.
safety of students. You know, you don't hear of a lot of students being injured in an accident.
Well, I was just trying to think through that in my head, I mean, I can't think of
I
the last
can't
time I
think
heard
of
about it.
it, right.
One of the things I've always been concerned about this, if you get in a situation where you're driving a bus with 50 kids on it in your elementary level and you have an accident, you got one seatbelt cutter and one driver.
Yep.
And
That's assuming there's nothing happened to that driver as
That's-
well.
Yeah.
now, you know, they say, well, have a senior level student on bus, teach them how to do that, but, you know, if you have an accident and say there's a fire, and those little kids are panicking, and you're trying to cut them out, it's gonna be chaos.
Well, to that point, if you watch a school bus safety video, when a bus catches on fire, they go pretty quickly. So it might be creating a whole other safety issue that it just doesn't exist. So my concern is just the extreme, the additional cost per bus, because like those pushers that we buy, I mean, those are $130,000-$140,000, and you know, I'm sure that'll add a substantial cost.
What do you mean by pushers?
The bigger, stuff
Oh,
front,
yeah.
yeah, the bigger bus, 84 passenger
Yeah.
bus, I mean, they're at least 134, and that's
Yeah.
not an expensive one. So by the time you add that other expense,
Excuse me.
What do they estimate that cost to be?
the bill didn't say, but I mean, I would hate to say, but they're expensive because, I would say you're probably, I don't know, you're probably another $20,000-$30,000 on a bus, I would say, to put bells on it.
And I don't know how that bill's written, but it's probably not gonna have a financial tag to it, because
Right.
it's gonna be, it's not state dollars, it's gonna be.
That's funded
Anything without
anyway.
any- Yeah.
Well, they taught us to use the state safety, or the federal safety grant, and again, I mean, that's very helpful, but it's not enough to cover the SROs. There's
The stuff that you're already.
technically not much, the money they're referring to use, it's
Yeah,
really,
this
there's
is
none
one
left.
of those unfunded mandates.
Yeah.
And we don't show that there's a need for it, really. I mean,
We do try to kill those up there, though.
Good.
Steve had mentioned the complexity, index as, you know, part of the funding formula. If there's conversation around the complexity index for small rural schools like in Putnam County, obviously, I'm sure you already know this, an increase in the complexity and the foundation benefits us far more than, looking at the multiplier that's within the complexity index. I could see legislators wanting to look at the multiplier because that's the same for every school district in the state, but the complexity specifically looks at poverty.
So say that statement again, I'm trying to write that down as fast as you're saying, so an increase in
The complexity index
Yep.
versus the multiplier within the index is better for rural schools because it's based on TANF and other federally funded programs for families living in poverty. That's more of a positive impact for us. I know in years past, they've increased the multiplier, and that's a statewide number, and that lifts everybody up, you know, which is good, not bad, but small rural schools typically are in a position where an increase that complexity index is better for us. Where,
No, this is my first time here, so this is a learning session for me. So, thank you. Thank you.
just one other quick thing, if I could, that I don't see any language on synchronous and asynchronous learning, this year. That may or may not, I don't know if that's good or bad. I know we only have access to 3 e-learning days, that changed, but with what we're doing in Cloverdale with our online school, I know there's some confusion, or at least there was with the Department of Ed, on what online programs should look like as it relates to asynchronous learning. So we would be glad to help if there's any questions that come up on that, provide our position on it.
Did you guys get clarification on the
We talked with, I actually met with Brian Murphy, Chief of Staff at IDOE, right before Christmas, and we did not get anything back from them because he said the law was too vague to issue, which is kind of let sleeping dogs lie. I mean, we were okay with that too. Vague might be good. But that's kind of where that's at. He said the department would push for clearer language on that, but again, I don't see that on the House or Senate side, and we're not pushing for anything any different, really. I mean, if we're gonna if it is.
The only thing to keep an eye out for is if the department starts pushing for clearer language, make sure it's going in the right direction. Sometimes some of these state agencies try to make their own legislation through the rulemaking process.
Right.
If you start to see that happening, let me know, and we can try and get ahead of it.
Perfect, thanks.
Yeah, I think one thing I want to add, though, we're talking about several meetings with the DOE this year, Dr. Jenner, and that whole reimagining high school that I'm sure they're going to bring to you next week is very important, I think, as we start to look at different ways of crediting and credentialing students and for graduation. Because right now we kind of base everything kind of historically on the Carnegie unit, where you go to school 180 days and you get credit at the end of that, or 2 credits, 1 per semester. And I think in this new way of educating and the new opportunities for students, even through like Area 30 and those types of things, and certifications, students might
This
be
would
able
be like the dual credit?
no, it would cover that, but also certifications such as like computer programming languages,
Oh, okay,
those types of
yeah.
things that wouldn't necessarily take a 90-day period of time, or 90 class period times, or those types of things. But those might be something that could be counted towards graduation credits. And so the reimagining of the credits that you earn in high school, I think is a good conversation to have. Because just the way, if you have that certification, that's actually something you can use right now. If you walk out that door in high school, you can be employed with some of those certifications. So I think that's a good conversation I know they're gonna bring it to you if they haven't already. Because I know I've heard it at least 6 times just in the last semester, so from DOE directly. So that's a really good conversation, and just kind of reimagining those. I know I'm talking about hands-on learning, those types of opportunities, and Area 30 is really big on that with us here. We're trying to do things at South Putnam as well with those experiential type learnings, and that's a big thing going with employers as well. Some of those internship type opportunities, those types of things for credits, and I just think the more experiential learning that we can get to our students, the more they're going to be able to apply themselves and get into that, either, those triple E's, right, being able to be employed or enrolled or enlisted in those 3 big things that we're shooting for. So I think the more that we can do that and equip our kids, the better.
I got some information about Senate Bill 305, which is educational savings account. Possibility of providing every parent a $7,000 education savings account that they could use for private schools, home schools, whatever, with very little accountability, no standards. We've been working in Indiana for almost 40 years trying to raise our standards, and now we're giving everybody $7,000 and said, do what you want to. You know, and I'm not in the business now, but, I just think that's a tremendous slap in the face to public education. I know there are good home schools, and I'm not knocking those people, but there are also some out there that are doing that. I got a call one time from a gentleman who was concerned because kids were all over his neighborhood all day long. He wanted to know if I didn't have him in school. And I got the name, and I said, well, those kids are homeschooled. He said, well, I don't understand, because both their parents work all day. So my response was sort of smart of it, but I said, well, they must be going to night school. And, you know, now you're gonna get $7,000 credit that you can use
With no accountability.
with no accountability. And it says something about, there's a curriculum issue here that part of the money should be spent on reading, grammar, math, social studies, or science. Part of the money shall be spent. Doesn't say, you know, you must include these items. And I think the only thing it mentions is they must take the I-Learn test. They don't have to pass it, they have to take it. And that's a real concern for people that have spent their lifetime in this profession.
Likewise, I have concern about that bill in the fact that we may end up paying twice for it. Because if we're not properly educating our children to certain standards, we're gonna then have to subsidize workforce training with them. And that's basically gonna cost us, you know, another $7,000 or more to make sure that when they show up on an employer's doorstep, that if they don't have math skills, the communication skills, writing skills, somebody's gonna have to tutor them, and it's gonna fall back on the state again, and we're gonna pay twice. You know, because there's no accountability, no standards, and, you know, we have workforce issues currently in the state in terms of just quantity but also, quality to some degree, you know, if we're educating our population with no standards, that creates a big credibility issue for the entire state on the global marketplace.
You know, I just can't, there is no telling how much money the state of Indiana has spent over the last 20 years for testing programs. And now we're saying, okay, here's $7,000, do what you want, and we're not gonna have any standards for you. That just doesn't make sense.
So you support the bill?
Surely you were listening. Like I said, I'm not in that seat any longer, but I still pay attention to what's going on. It's,
Well, the other thing is, I mean, one of the biggest criteria people use to determine where they're gonna live is how good, especially if they have children, is how good the local school district is. And if we continue to have deterioration of the school district because of state policy, then that's gonna make our smaller communities less competitive in attracting residents, attracting businesses, attracting investment and things like that, so.
I don't wanna stifle conversation, but I do have to leave soon, so I wanna make sure we kinda get through all the questions. And a lot of these bills are gonna change a lot
Yeah.
or die altogether, so I don't wanna get too laser focused on one bill that I think we're all kind of in the same agreeance on, so, just wanna make sure we save enough, few moments for everybody else.
Well, not being involved in education, but just being a taxpayer and having looked at things for the last 87 years and being involved with the public for the last 87 years in one form or another, 55 of them here in Putnam County. But I would be opposed to this bill simply on the fact that there's no strings. There's no requirements. There's no performance. And you give these people $7,000 and they'll find a way to spend it, but not necessarily education for the child.
Is that per student? Is that 7,000?
I haven't looked at that bill, it's a Senate bill, and
I think it's per student.
I think so.
Okay,
Just one comment, I mean, I agree with what's been said, just to piggyback on that, if you wanted to dig deeper or do more legislation that would have even more effect, maybe homeschooling and like those students who aren't in traditional enrollments, be kept up to standards, because I know a family in Putnam County whose like 14-year-old could not do division or alphabetize. This was several years ago, and it just broke my heart. So, I mean, homeschooling, I don't think they have performance like standards either. So, just something, you know, if you're talking about accountability, I'm on that board. So maybe legislation to make all students more accountable so that we do have a population that's more, you know, ready to be a functioning adult would be good.
we do want to give our new director of Area 30, okay? I did first section here.
Appreciate that, I just, thank you. You have 1002 a couple times on your bullet points, and I'm just, like to hear your thoughts on the career scholarship account and how you see that working. It's a little bit concerning, I think, with career centers and some of our schools, on how you see that, you know, how does that get administered, and, you know, we work really hard with our community, and our community is very supportive of the Career Center and our schools, to provide internships, and to see some of that trying to be taken away in a sense. We're a small community, and we don't have a ton of internship opportunities anyway. I don't know, I'd just like to hear your opinions on some of those things and how that may change graduation requirements.
yeah, first of all, I appreciate what you guys do out there. We've fought for funding for out there for quite a while. I would like to actually see it not change. If anything, I'd like to see an increase in funding. My concern is I see a competing mindset in the General Assembly right now. There's a focus, as we're talking about, like higher education and capital investments. I was just in a conversation on Thursday, and there's this trend that I'm a little concerned about. They're hyper-focused on how many Indiana students are applying to higher education and how many Indiana students are being accepted, and then how many foreign students are being accepted, and there's this concern. And I feel like in the last couple of years, we've really shifted our mindset that higher education isn't the only path forward for students, and I think that's, you know, where the services that you guys are providing out there is critical to that. But I think that's also shifting the population of students that are interested in higher education. So we can't have that mindset where we utilize more of your services, we get individuals into a career path quicker, but yet we're concerned because there's less Hoosiers applying to higher education. I mean, it sounds, you know, and then this other conversation around higher education, I know that's not what you're asking about, but the concern there for me is, they're concerned about foreigners coming into our schools and learning and going back to their country. Well, my concern is I want our Hoosier students that do choose to go to higher education. I know I'm getting away from your question, but it's a passion for me, is I want them to be challenged by the best and the brightest from all over the world, not just from Indiana, because I mean, if we're only competing against ourselves, we're not gonna be the best on the global platform. And I think in today's economy, you have to be. And, so again, I wanna echo that I appreciate what you guys are doing. I'm hoping that these bills actually don't change that. But we'll have a chance to actually have that conversation on the House floor, and these bills will change significantly as we go through the process. It's a marathon.
I know it is.
So, a lot of people see these bills that, you know, they come out in that first week, and they get very concerned. They're like, this is a horrible bill. That's one person's perspective of what should be done. Now it has to go through the gauntlet of the committees. If it survives that, then it has to come to the House floor where we can all have an input, and then go through the process on the other side. So bills will look very different, or should look very different. If they're a bad bill, they should look very different by the time we get to the end of this process. So,
Beau, has there been any conversation about restoring the 13th check for all us retirees?
there have been a lot of conversations about it. The House has passed that. I think we've passed it twice while I've been there, but it's died in the Senate. I don't know exactly why it dies over there, but, I don't know really. I don't understand why a lot of things that happen in the Senate happen, but.
I'd like to comment on that, if I may. That's why my wife and I are here. We're retired educators, glad to see so many other educators here, but we wanted to talk about the pension. I retired in 2012, and my wife retired a year before, and she went back to work for Paul for a couple of years before I finally got her fully retired. But our retirement checks that we started receiving back then have virtually remained unchanged in their value until last year when the legislature approved a 1% increase and did away with the 13th check, which for most retirees, I think, was a pay decrease. And then now with House Bill 1029 and Senate Bill 30, they're wanting to reinstate the 13th check. But you probably know, Beau, that the 13th check is kind of a misnomer. It's just a flat a micro bonus that varies, that has very little relationship to the other 12 monthly checks. It's just a very small fraction of what we would receive per month. And so I was looking at inflation indicator indexes yesterday and realized that our checks, the value of our retirement checks have declined close to 30% since we started receiving them. And I think that's really taken a big hit on people that have worked very hard in a very hard profession. It doesn't pay a tremendous amount of money. And I just wish the legislature would think about, and I know they're wanting to reinstate, the bill is to reinstate the 13th check with somewhat of a bump. In the past, it's just been $300 or maybe a little bit more. But I would like to see it indexed to the cost of living, to inflation, like Social Security. Many of us have been the beneficiaries of an 8.7% increase this year, whereas the teachers' retirement fund checks are still remaining stagnant, and I think it's really starting to negatively affect some of us that have been running those checks for a while. So I'm hoping that you might be able to share an insight or help us with that.
So, I'm taking a different approach to it. So I'm trying to look at all of the pensions in Indiana and see if there isn't a way. I think there's too many duplicative efforts going on with our pensions that could be centralized, and the cost savings from those centralized services being combined to administer all those pensions together could then help grow more funds in those pensions. That's something that I'm working on right now. Instead of just always looking at 13th check or increasing cost of living adjustments, trying to do cost savings within the system itself to generate more funds.
That you're talking about state funded pensions of all
State
kinds.
funded, yeah.
Yeah, I guess a thought that crosses my mind, and have my eyes opened up a little bit with my wife's income now, and was amazed that there's not some recognition of inflation now. Up until the last couple of years, it was pretty low, so not too much of a dramatic input. But I sort of look at it from the lens, I look at it from the county. Even if we can't, stay with inflation, because you got to live within the means that you have. The fact that you do nothing, I found rather amazing. So, example, county this last year, we knew inflation was running, 8-9%. Wasn't any way we were going to balance our budget and do 8 or 9%, but we gave 5%. So the point is, within our means, we recognize that our employees need to, try and make them whole. So I wouldn't want the state to not balance their budget, but if it's not a priority at all, that's not a good thing, So there, I think most people would recognize, hey, you don't have the means, okay, but to just not have a plan, And that's not good.
I agree with that.
And one thing I'd like to add as a former administrator, and I know several administrators are here, I just recently read an article in the Indianapolis Star that 91% of administrators say it's difficult to get candidates from Indiana who are willing to take these positions, especially in math, science, and social studies. And according
Special
to,
ed.
yes?
Special ed.
Yeah, and even to, and when you look at the Indiana.gov website, you talk about the amount that starting pay for teachers, the average is $35,000. However, the cost of living here in Indiana is $38,000. So,
I think it's higher than 35,000.
well, it all depends too where you are, it all depends on property taxes, how much.
But
you're
this
willing-
isn't confined to just the education.
Yeah.
This is all, I mean, I work in home healthcare for my day job, and, you know, we're capped at reimbursement rates of Medicare and Medicaid. And especially Medicaid, we can't afford to send an employee to somebody's house and then to work with them for an hour and then pay their mileage and time to get to the
Costs more
patient.
than what you get reimbursed, that's what I was
And,
getting at
and
with our
when
EMS.
when these individuals can go out and deliver a pizza for $16 an hour,
Yeah.
and they don't understand why we can't give them a pay raise. Well, we can't raise above what reimbursement rates are without losing money. So, I mean, it's not confined to just education. We're seeing this, with our police departments, we're seeing it across the board, so I think that we have to have
Broader discussion.
a broader discussion about how all this works.
You know, we all got a $325 payout last year because the state had some extra money. It would have been nice if those monies, instead of giving us free money, had been put into some of these programs to increase pensions and things that are remaining stagnant. I haven't been able to figure out why we got that free money last year.
I have some of my own perspective on that, but I ended up voting for it. I wasn't a fan of it. I was publicly against it. I thought we should put it in one-time investments that had long-term benefits and impact. But I did end up voting for it, and I said that I would only do it once because there was some conversation that we'd be doing it again in this session. We're kind of in a hard spot. If you voted no for it, well, there was nothing else to do with the money at that moment, so it's just gonna be sitting there. So my thought process was, well, let's help people as we can right now. I was against it, but with future dollars, people at least knew where I was gonna stand. So.
Bill, we don't want to leave you out of cold, you always have something here.
I just got a whole laundry list yesterday, and I haven't had a chance to go through it. The one that jumped out at me was House Bill 1280. It prohibits economic development incentives for e-commerce businesses, and that potentially could have an adverse impact on both our folks out there at Cena and our Walmart distribution center, as well as, you know, we send a lot of employees into Hendricks County and at 39 and over in Plainfield, and a lot of those are e-commerce facilities, so this could have an adverse impact on future growth of those facilities, for future opportunities for local residents, so.
Whose bill is that, does it say?
It's Green, House Bill 1280, authored by Rob Green.
I haven't heard any conversations around that one.
And
So
I wasn't even aware of it until I started going through the list here.
I'm pretty sure he's a new member.
And then I would just say, anything that, you know, if you're gonna take revenue away from one pocket, make sure we can replace it, because, you know, we've been fortunate here in Putnam County. The county council has been good about taking care of things in terms of like public safety lit and stuff like that. And quite frankly, that's helped us out a lot. We've had to replace 3 fire trucks. A pumper truck, we bought one 2-3 years ago, about $650,000. We replaced our aerial tower, that was $1.2 million. We have a new pumper truck on order, the lead time on it is such, we ordered it last year, we won't see it until 2024, and that's $715,000. And as the only paid department in the county, our guys respond all over the county, and fortunately, you know, county council has seen the benefit of public safety lit, and that has helped us be able to make these purchases so that we can support not just our citizens in Green Castle, but throughout the county through our good working relationship with the volunteer departments.
I do have to take off, but I do wanna say, kind of, I'm gonna segue off of what you're saying, Bill. I've always felt fortunate to live where we live, but you don't realize how lucky we are until you sit in that General Assembly and you hear the problems that other communities have. We really do have great local elected officials that work together for our community, and we really are lucky for that, so, just wanna say.
I need 5 minutes of your time.
Can you walk and talk as I walk to the car?
I can.
I was
Okay.
gonna ask if I could walk you to your car, because I do it.
Well, if you walk over here quicker, we can.
Michael in with you? Thank you.
Yep, good to see you.
Congratulations
Has to go. I'm gonna go do some networking. That was so much fun. Look how diverse this crowd is, guys. So diverse. All right. I'll see you guys.